Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sue Long-Carrick and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sue Long-Carrick, and as always, it's lovely to have you join me. Now, today I'm excited to be talking about a health topic that is probably dear to my heart because we're going through it here at home with my husband. We're going to be talking about blood sugars, the blood sugar spikes, aging, how we can balance our sugar levels, and why it's the key to our overall health. My guest today is Amy K. Wilson, a board-certified geriatric pharmacist, a certified fitness professional, and a certified nutrition coach. So as she says, she's a triple threat. She uses the Faster Way to Fat Loss platform, and she's disrupting the diet industry and helping her clients take their health back. Amy's mission is to empower and equip her clients to take charge of their health and find balance in their lives. With over 30 years of experience, Amy specializes in developing individualized health plans that navigate through her clients' individual barriers, allowing them to be successful in their efforts. She's about helping people prevent and reverse diseases with nutrition and fitness. And in her words, you are never too old to make changes. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Amy. It's lovely to have you join me on the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I think we're going to have a great conversation.
I think we are too, because the topic that we're talking about today is quite relevant, especially when we're aging, and something that I'm not sure many of us really understand. So hoping that you'll be able to shed some light on it as well. But before we start, I'd just like you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
So my name is Amy K. Wilson, and I almost say I'm like a triple threat. I am a board-certified geriatric pharmacist, a certified nutrition coach, and then also a certified fitness professional. So all three of those have come together. I still am a full-time practicing pharmacist, and I do have a full-time virtual nutrition coach. So I have clients all over the world. And my goal really is to keep people off of medication, which may sound really weird. You're a pharmacist. You should be, no. I would prefer that you learn how to eat, exercise, reduce inflammation so that you're not dependent on medication. And if you do have to take medication, that it's the lowest effective dose and it's not 10, 20, 30 medications, where I see that in the United States in a lot of my residents who come into nursing homes. And I'm sure I read a lot about Australia and other places, and it seems to be very similar. And so what I would like to do is teach and educate and show that eating healthy isn't boring, that working out doesn't have to be a chore or labor or hours, and that we can put all this together so that in our 50s and beyond, our second chapter, whatever you want to call it, we can live our best lives and prevent disease and get stronger so that we're not what I consider frail and maybe decrepit or in the rocking chair. We're not meant to grow older per se. Yes, we do age, add years, but we're not meant to become frail and less than. And so I go by the nutrition coach pharmacist, and that's kind of in a nutshell.
Well, that sounds really good. And I've actually never met anyone who has those three prongs to their skill set, because you've really got it all covered. And I do agree about the medication. We've got an aging population, probably worldwide, really, but in Australia, we're grappling with the issue that over the next 10 or 20 years, the higher percentage of population is going to be in the older age group, and they're trying to scramble now for planning for future aged care and so forth, because there are a lot of people who, for one reason or another, are going to need that care. And what you're saying is, and I know people who are on medications, and perhaps if they just tweak their lifestyle a little bit, they wouldn't need as much or any at all. And I think that that's a big dilemma that we have, because we've got an aging population, and unfortunately not a healthy one. And we could be doing something about it. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about that. And I'm very fascinated by the different areas that you are involved in, because they all gel. They're all as important as each other, and I think it's a great combination. So you are a triple threat. Okay, now I want to talk about today blood sugar, and I've actually got a personal connection there. My husband is a type 2 diabetes, and he's actually just had one of those Libre sensors fitted, so he doesn't have to prick his finger 4 times a day to see how his glucose is going. So I'm going to have a couple of questions for you on behalf of him, actually. But the rising of diabetes and type 2 diabetes is quite prevalent out here in Australia, and probably over in the States as well. And I also think it's something that people find difficult to grasp how to control it without the medication. He's currently going to an endocrinologist, and I think she's trying to minimize the amount of medication he has to take. But that's not easy to control. So let's start off by talking about perhaps, how what we eat affects our blood sugar level, and what that means for our bodies.
Absolutely. So with type 2 diabetes, and this is near dear in my heart, it runs in my family. I have the type 2 diabetes gene. When I hit menopause, I was pre-diabetic. Even though I was doing all the things I thought I was doing right, it's still what's called your A1C. It's a marker that is a 3-month test look back to see how your blood sugar is doing, was elevating and put me in the pre-diabetes kind of like way. And I'm probably going to guess 50, maybe 75% of the listeners maybe have seen that A1C number, and it might be elevated. And like, well, what does this mean? What does this mean I have prediabetes? Does this mean I'm destined to have type 2 diabetes? And what I'm going to tell you is that you can control that, you can reverse it, and you can make it better. But how do you do that? First of all, you have to understand what is going on, because what you're going to be told is, oh, well, you know what? You have insulin resistance, or your blood sugar's too high. And to some people, that doesn't mean anything. And when you don't understand what's going on in your body, how can you fix that? So this is what happens with type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes. We have what's called insulin receptors everywhere, a lot on our muscles. We also eat a lot of processed foods. When we start shutting down those receptors and insulin can no longer bind to those receptors, our blood sugar stays high. And then we kind of do it to ourselves with our diets and our nutrition with ultra processed foods that constantly keeps our blood sugar elevated. Now, insulin is not the villain. We make insulin being like, oh, well, it's all because of the insulin, because the insulin's getting released too much. It is, but we're doing it to ourselves. So every time that we eat ultra processed foods, every time that we are eating chemicals, every time that we're eating sugar, high fructose syrup, corn syrup, insulin does have to get released because insulin's job is to go to those receptors. It's kind of like a lock and key. They turn it on and allow the blood sugar now to go into the muscle. But I want you to think about the receptors have had it. It's like, insulin keeps knocking on their door. It's kind of like, you know what, we're done with you. It's like, talk to the hand. I'm not dealing with you anymore.
Mm.
And so it stops working. Well, where does the blood sugar go? It doesn't. It stays in the blood, which causes elevation of the blood sugar. So what does that cause? Well, that causes increasing urination. It can also cause chronic inflammation. So increase in inflammation, we're seeing that it can cause other issues in the brain. So that is what we call type 2 diabetes. Now, does that mean that you can't have a candy bar or cookie? No, but let's talk about what you do 90% of the time. And that doesn't mean just chicken breast and broccoli. And because that's what I always get. It's like, but I can't eat good food. We're so conditioned to think from whether it's commercials or media that everything has to be quick and easy and come out of a bag. It
Mhm.
doesn't. So what I want you to start thinking about is how can I reduce inflammation? Because that is really the cornerstone of heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, certain cancers is inflammation. And the way that you can do that is by eating real food. And that is your fruits. Yes, even if you have type 2 diabetes, you can still eat fruit. Your vegetables, meats, chicken, fish, grains. But here's the caveat. You have to eat all three of those. We call macronutrients, your proteins, your fats, your carbohydrates. You can't just have carbohydrates because we do know that carbohydrates, when it gets digested, because carbohydrate digestion, especially for simple carbohydrates, start in the mouth right away, and that will elevate the blood sugar. You need to have protein. You need to have fat. So every meal that you eat should always have three things. It should have a protein, it should have a fat, and it should have a carbohydrate. When you do that, you will start what's called balancing your blood sugar, meaning that there is this little hump. It goes up and down, up and down. That's normal. What we don't want, and this is what happens with type 2 diabetics or people are pre-diabetic, is humongous spikes. It goes very, very high and then comes low, very, very high and then comes low. When that happens, it's usually because of eating simple carbohydrates or pure sugar. When you can start looking at food as medicine
Mhm.
and also tasty medicine, good stuff, and thinking of it as how can I reduce my chronic inflammation? How can I stabilize my blood sugar? Then you will start seeing that A1C number come down. Then you'll start seeing if you're wearing a Libre or a Dexcom, or if you're taking the finger sticks, you'll start seeing your glucose numbers coming down. The other thing that you can do is exercise. Going for a walk, 10-minute walk after you eat will cause those receptors to turn on even more and pull the blood sugar out, or the sugar out of your blood into your muscles, because your muscles are going to need that energy at that moment in time. The other thing that you can do is start lifting weights, because the more muscle you have, the more insulin receptors that you have. And then we can start reversing that resistance and start increasing insulin sensitivity. So that's kind of like the long, I guess, answer to your question.
No, that was great. That answered a couple of my
Yeah.
questions that I've had, and I you've actually explained it quite clearly, which is good because a lot of times that you go to a specialist or something. I go with my husband when he has his appointments, mainly because as we get older, you go in and you listen, and then you come out and you've forgotten half of what they've said. And if you've got another person with you, they'll pick up on what you've
Mm-hmm.
missed, hopefully. But sometimes specialists find it difficult to talk in layman's terms.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're going away or you're feeling that you're getting conflicting information. Because I want to actually talk, well, first, there's lots of things I want to talk to you about with this. It's a great topic. so when your blood sugar spikes, that's because like even we don't eat much processed foods at all. At
Mm-hmm.
least, we do have whole foods.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 95% of the time. We might go out and have a meal or something occasionally, but we try to minimize the amount of packaged food that we have. And I've always tried to live that way. But I do find that sometimes even then the blood sugar spikes. And I think it might have to do with what you were saying about having protein, fats, and carbs
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if you could just give me an example of, say, for breakfast, what might be a meal that you could have that covers those three and doesn't make the blood sugar spike.
So let's talk about a healthy meal that you think you should have that would actually cause you to increase your blood sugar. So a
Yeah.
good
Okay.
example would be oatmeal, porridge, fruits. So you're thinking, oh, breakfast, it's warm, it's comfy. But the problem with that is those are all great carbohydrates. They really are. They have fiber, everything. The problem is it's all carbohydrates. So the
Right.
only thing it's going to do is it's going to break down very quickly. Okay, well, what happens if you add, let's say you do eggs first and have the fat and the protein with the eggs. Maybe you have some chicken sausage with it too, something on the lower fat, so you're not having bacon or anything like that. And your fruit is berries, which is lower glycemic. It's not going to have as much of an impact on your blood sugar as, say, a full ripe banana. And that you
Okay.
take your oatmeal, maybe half, because it also depends on portion sizes and how much that you have. So you eat your eggs and your chicken sausage first, because that's going to start the digestion process and it's going to slow everything down. Then you have your oatmeal with fruit last, because then you won't have as much of a impact on your blood sugar. It's still going to raise, but it's not going to raise as high. And then
Mm.
once again, it's also, think about the portion size. Your portion size will have a direct correlation with how much it impacts your blood sugar. So take it down to a quarter to a half. You still can enjoy those carbohydrates because you still need those carbohydrates. It's just that's not where all your energy source is coming from. And that should help dampen that spike. So it's not so much of
Mm.
a spike, it's more of a little hill.
An undulation, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we're finding at the moment. And I apologize, listeners, that I'm sort of being a bit personal about this, talking about my husband, but it's just so relevant. He will have, he's going for breakfast, it spikes
Mm-hmm.
because of what he's having and what you've just
Mm-hmm.
talked about. But then for the rest of the day, he's managing to get those little undulations. And at some point, it's dropping just before dinner. It will get down quite low. And like, for example, that the sensor that he's wearing gives you a little alarm if it gets
Mm-hmm.
too low or too high.
Mm-hmm.
And his is sort of getting quite low. So what happens, perhaps we should talk about that too, because we talk about spiking high, but
Mm-hmm.
we also don't need to get too low either, do we?
No, in fact, so what I would say for him for breakfast is trying to have some more protein and having
Yeah.
less of the high impact carbohydrates and going for a walk for 10 minutes after he's done at a good pace. He's going to notice a big difference. In the afternoon, let's put some complex carbohydrates in there, things that are going to be a slower, like your fruits. Anything that has a lot of fiber in it is going to be your complex carbohydrates. So that's going to help with a slower release of sugar into the bloodstream, so you don't have those dips. For people over 50, especially, hypoglycemia can actually be worse than hyperglycemia, and that means going too low.
Mm.
You can go too high and bring it back very easily. A lot of times when you go low, sometimes you don't realize. Some people do, especially if you're not diabetic, you get the shakes, you get the sweats, you might feel nauseous, you might get a headache, you're like, oh, I need to eat. If you are type 2 diabetes and you've been this way for a while, you may not get the signs and symptoms of being hypoglycemic. And that can be, it can be fatal in some cases. So
Mm,
that's one of the things,
mm,
because your body does need glucose. But it also sets you up on a roller coaster. If you're constantly going high, constantly going low, so high, you take some insulin to bring it down, low, you drink orange juice to get it up. And so you're never stabilizing your blood sugar. You're always trying
mm,
to catch it. Where
mm.
if we can start working on the nutrition part with the protein, the fat, and the carbohydrates and getting that balanced, and then working with your physician, because once you start getting it balanced, guess what you don't need as much of? Medication.
Medication.
Because what we don't want to do is send somebody in hypoglycemic. So once we can start getting that balance, one, you feel better, you sleep better, you have more energy, especially for diabetics and type 2 diabetics. Maybe we can decrease the medication, depends on how long you've been on insulin, if that can totally come off. And the other thing that we have to look at is eye health, kidney health, how, if you have a sore, how quickly it heals. So there's all these things that keeping your blood sugar balanced is so imperative.
Mm, mm. And that's why the topic part of the topic you wanted to discuss was the relationship between blood sugar spikes and aging.
Mm-hmm.
My husband is 75, so, you know, as I said, he's managing now that it's actually since he's got that app and he checked it's so much easier to check,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I've spiked here or whatever, or I've got an alarm because I'm too low. So how, what is the relationship between the sugar spikes and aging? Is there a
Well,
correlation
oh,
there, or is it just
absolutely.
because of what you're eating?
No, it's absolutely. So when we have these, and it, once again, remember, we go up and down. So I don't want everything
Mm,
like, oh, I can't ever have a banana because it's going to make me get wrinkles. No, not the case. It's when it goes way, way up and comes down. So when you're constantly eating ultra processed foods or constantly eating just carbohydrates and sugars, when you get those spikes, all of us have DNA. It's the miracle of DNA. And if you look at a strand of DNA, they have these little things on the end that look like shoelace caps. They're called telomeres. Every time that you increase or spike your blood sugar, those telomeres shorten and your DNA shorten. That happens with aging, but you don't need to help it along.
mm,
And we've seen that actually when you start balancing your blood sugars, that those telomeres get a little bit longer. So what happens? What's the correlation with that? Well, we see more wrinkles, we see more inflammation. So not only with inflammation, not meaning like joint pain. That's one thing that you do see, like you think about inflammation being joint. I'm talking about inside your body,
mm,
inflammation that way. So we see more inflammation when you spike. So like I said, sagging skin, the wrinkles, not feeling good. We forget, we always think about the outside, what we look like outside, but what's going on inside? Do you feel good? Do you have brain fog? Are you not sleeping? Is it just an effort to get out of a chair? All of those things can be caused by increased spikes in your blood sugar. So when you start to balance the blood sugar, your hormones can work better. Your body's not
mm,
constantly fighting itself to get back into what we call homeostasis, being in that nice, area that everything's all peachy keen. We
mm.
want to really work at finding, let's say, balance, because when you find balance, your body and its systems can all work so much better.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and just to clarify, just for layman's terms, when you talk about inflammation on the inside, what would you be seeing if you could see
So
that?
what I usually say is, this is my easiest way to think about it. So let's say you got a mosquito bite, and you get this redness and you get this swelling, and your body's like, okay, we have something here that we need to take care of. So it sends all of the troops and it takes care of that, and it goes, okay, you do this, and then before you know it, that mosquito bite's healed, it's gone, the skin's clear, and the body's like, okay, troops, come back, go back home, we're done. The problem with chronic inflammation, I want you to think about 24/7 mosquito bites inside. And it's caused by processed foods, sugar, chemicals, additives. And the body keeps sending out the troops because it's like, I'm being attacked, but it never can bring them back home.
Mm,
And so what that looks like is could be clogged arteries. It could be visceral fat. Visceral fat is the fat that surrounds your organs. Um, all of these things that are causing what's called chronic inflammation. It's kind of like your body's just going in slow motion because it's not producing at full effect. The other thing is that we need bacteria in our gut. You've probably heard a lot about gut microbiome.
mm, mm,
When we eat sugars, when we eat all this processed food, we're wiping out that gut microbiome. And that causes depression, anxiety. There are certain nutrients that those bacteria help go from one place to the gut to the other place. And when we don't have that bacteria, things get clogged, things don't happen. And so we cause this kind of like backup, this buildup, this extra kind of like just like swampiness, which is what we absolutely don't want. And when
mm.
you get rid of that chronic inflammation by eating real foods, by moving your body, all of a sudden your body can do what it needs to do. Chemical processes can happen. You have a gut microbiome that works. Your blood sugar will go down. Your blood pressure will go down. We start preventing and helping certain disease states.
Yeah, I was just thinking, the body's a marvelous thing, but it's our responsibility, isn't it? If we
Mhm.
want to keep it working for our benefit so that we can live well and live longer. So we really do need to take that responsibility and stop putting the stress on, our bodies to perform
Mhm.
because we're not respecting it, I
Yeah.
suppose, for want of a better word.
Our bodies are very, very smart and they'll figure out how to survive, but we can help it along so much where we can help it to be where it's in this optimal condition and give it the
Mm,
right things. It's like, I always say it's like a car. So if you have this Ferrari that takes super fuel, you don't pull up to the gas station and give it the regular or the lowest grade because it won't work well. It's the
mm,
same thing with our bodies. Our bodies will work, and you might be thinking, "Oh, it's just age. I'm over 50, I'm over 60. This is just the way it is. Our bodies are meant to start slowing down. They're meant to quote unquote fall apart." I hear that all the time. It's my age. No, it's things that we've been doing have caught up with us, but you're never too old to start taking care of yourself. Because I get that too. It's like, oh, I'm just too old. It's been this way forever. I'm not, it's not going to change now. Oh, yes, it can. And you absolutely can do things to make it better.
mm. I was just going to ask you that
Yeah.
question, is it ever too late? So if someone hasn't been looking after themselves, and they're listening to you and listening to the podcast and thinking, oh, Amy makes so much sense and I really should be doing something. What would be the first few steps that you would suggest perhaps to your clients or to the listeners?
So what I tell in the program that I coach, the first 6 weeks is all about building that foundation because it's so important to do baby steps. And I'm sure you
Mm,
have things in Australia with like, these programs that they start one way and they're doing all the workouts and they're going to this camp and they look amazing. Okay. Really, does anybody have that much time to devote 24/7? No, we don't. And usually what you'll see 6 months down the road is that they're back to where they were.
yeah.
We have to make this work with your lifestyle. That's the
Mm,
thing. It has to work with your lifestyle. The other thing is that you have to decide that I am going to take care of me. That it's finally that I am going to change, that you're going to do all the things that you need to do to reverse your course. So the first thing that you're going to do is baby steps because if I tell you you're going to do this, one, it's overwhelming. Two, you just like, okay, I'll do it for 2 days. We'd see this every year, January 1st. We see it every year. And I'm going to get rid of all the sugar and the processed food and throw everything out and get all this healthy food. And I joined the gym. And then 2 weeks later, I don't want to eat this stuff anymore and I don't want to go to the gym. So we have to make it work with you. So the first thing that I want you to do is pick one thing. One thing. Maybe it's just drinking a water first thing when you get out of bed and not having a cup of coffee with a bunch of creamer and sugar in it. And you start with that. Then maybe it's changing the way that you have breakfast. Maybe you're not eating the sugary cereal, the sugary oatmeal, and you're looking at something that maybe you're going to have some eggs with some avocados and some whole grain toast with some berries and make it very nutritious. So maybe you start that, and 2, 3 weeks later, you're ready to go with lunch. And 2, 3 weeks later, you're ready to start with dinner. And then now you're looking at, hey, I'm walking every day. Okay, now maybe I can add weight training a couple days a week. So if you're doing it on your own, baby steps. If you are clueless, get help. Get someone like me, get a program, get a plan that's going to help you, not something that is a flash in the pan or promises 10 pounds in 10 days, because that, especially for us over 50, every time that we lose weight like that, you're losing muscle mass. Muscle is our fountain of youth. Muscle is what keeps us healthy. Muscle is what keeps us walking and being able to get out of a chair. We need to be in the business of building muscle and saving muscle and not losing muscle. So if when you're looking at things, what are they saying? If they're saying lose weight quick, that's not what you want. What you're looking at is health, strength, and longevity. And that is what you need. And don't be afraid to spend, I hate to say it, don't be afraid to spend some money on yourself, because
Yeah.
the amount, I don't know how much it is in there in Australia, but it's expensive to live in a long-term care facility here in the United States. It's not cheap. It's also not living. It's also not doing what you want to do in your retirement years. And I think that's the thing that we all see is retirement, like, oh, I want to do this. I want to do this. Nobody just wants to sit there and stare into space. We want
No.
to be thriving. And that's what we need to be start training for in our second chapter, is to get healthy, get strong, and thrive.
I love that. I think that the point you made about getting some help if you don't know where to start, starting is such an obstacle. Once you start, I think you're right, but it's taking those first few steps and knowing what you're doing. And also, otherwise you're thinking, oh, I really want to do this, but I'm not sure how. So you procrastinate. Whereas if you go to a professional, even, people go, oh, I can't afford that. But even if you just go to get a plan and then check in, if you can't do a full-on course or whatever, but at least it gives you a starting point and something to follow where you've got it written down perhaps, and you don't have to think about what to do. You've got it written there, and I think that makes it, or you're checking in with someone like yourself.
Yeah.
And you're able to talk about the things that you're struggling with. And, a good coach will be able to help you work around that. So I do think it's a good point about getting help and not necessarily trying to do it on yourself, because I think it will peter out a lot quicker than trying to do it with someone.
We're so good at talking ourselves out of things, or we get so caught up in the voices in our head or the stories that we tell ourselves. And I do a lot of behavior coaching. I could give everybody a certain, per se, plan, diet. We see in the magazines. You see it, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Google. The thing is, it doesn't work because it has to work with you. It has to work with who you are, your personalities, your traits. And sometimes you don't even know you have that in you until you talk to somebody. You don't know the next step until you talk to somebody, until you know that, hey, I have a plan. Okay, I check this box off every day. I got to check this box off every day. And then before you know it, and especially when you don't look at it as weight loss, when you look at it getting strength, before you know it, you've lost inches and you're able to lift your 20-pound dog or your grandkids with ease. And you're like, wait, when did that happen? And it's that keeping going forward. I always tell my clients that the day one that they start with me, and that's day one, we don't stop until our last breath here on earth, because it's not a diet. It's all about getting healthy, staying healthy, building muscle. And you just have to decide to start. And that is actually the hardest part, is to
Mm,
say, okay, I'm going to do this. Let's start.
mm, mm. And I think that point you made, this is day one and we're not going to finish until we've taken our last breath. I think the way we look at staying healthy, the way we look at exercise, the way we look at eating, it's all um, from a negative perspective,
Mm-hmm.
rather than saying, oh, this is my lifestyle. This is what I will be incorporating into my day because I want to feel better and I want to be healthier. And if you can switch your mindset around from going, oh, I don't feel like going to the gym today, or I don't feel like, I want to break out and have this. If you stick to it, it does become part of your lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes a
Yeah.
habit.
Yeah, it becomes part of you. It becomes your
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
And if you think about, I can't do this, I will try it, maybe if it's not going to work. If you say, I can, I will, I do, I get to instead of I have to, a lot of that is a lot of mindset changing. And when you start changing what's called your identity, that you start seeing yourself as somebody who exercises, you start seeing yourself as somebody who enjoys fruits and vegetables. There's a lot of changing that happens in the 6 weeks with my clients, that they're always amazed about. Oh my gosh, I don't crave sugar anymore. Well, the reason you don't crave sugar anymore is because you're not spiking your blood sugar anymore. When your blood sugar is stable, guess what? You sleep better, you have more energy, and you stop craving sugar. And
Mm,
that is crazy to some people because they've craved sugar all their lives. The other problem is that as women, a lot of times we don't eat enough, and that causes us to crave sugar because our body's saying, hey, girlfriend, feed me. You're not
mm,
feeding me. And
mm,
so it's going
mm,
to ask for the quickest form of energy, which is sugar. But when you can start fueling your body with what it needs, all of a sudden those cravings go away. And
mm,
might be a pan of brownies on the table, and you're like, okay. I used to be somebody who wanted those. Now I'm like, okay, I can take it or leave it. It's
mm,
very
mm.
powerful.
Yes, and I think your self-confidence builds as well with each success that you have.
Hmm.
And the other point I think is important is that you do surround yourself with people who are going to be supportive of what you're
Hmm.
trying to do,
Yeah.
because it's I had a situation, and I knew someone, um, they had an addiction to alcohol, and they would take themselves off to a clinic and you know dry out and
Hmm.
sort of not drink, but then they would go home and their family would still continue to drink,
Mm.
and so they were sort of put back into it all. And I
Hmm.
mean, they didn't really have that support where perhaps everyone says, well, okay, we're with you. We know that's important to you. You need to, we're going to do what we can to help. So you need those cheerleaders around
Oh,
you.
absolutely. And when I love being the cheerleader when I'm a coach, when I coach people, I just love being the cheerleader. But I also love it when I get two or three people who sign up with me at the same time,
Yeah, that
because
buddy.
that buddy, that that community, because community is huge. When you have those hands on your back, when you have someone that's like, okay, I don't feel like doing this today, but we're gonna do it. And I absolutely love coaching friends and close friends because they say each other's sentences, even husbands and wives too, because of that being that community, and they're doing it together. So if they're going to happy hour, they're going to make better choices at happy
Mm,
hour. If it used to be maybe they went to happy hour, maybe now they're going for a walk instead, or going for a cup of coffee that's not full of sugar and junk. And they're changing their habits along with their tribe. And
mm.
that always, I love when people lift each other up.
Yes, yeah, and that's it. If you have someone else that's doing it with you, it makes it so much easier than
Yeah.
trying to do it on your own. Um, I just want to have a couple more questions, but I wanted to get your thoughts on intermittent fasting
Hmm.
because I don't think I've done it, but in fact, I think my husband and I used to do it because we didn't have breakfast. We would
Hmm.
just get up and have a coffee, and so at least he's sort of improved there, where he now has a meal when he gets up. We've got to tweak it a little bit so it doesn't spike. But you were saying that, women in particular, and I think women, well, I thought it was my generation, but I don't think it's really changed. But, you'd always be on a diet. You'd be living on a lettuce leaf, or, it was all this to try and lose weight quickly. Then you'd stop and you'd put it all back on. So with intermittent fasting, does that really, is that really good for you, or would that affect your blood sugar levels as well?
It does. So one, it hasn't changed, unfortunately. We have not stopped the cycle yet. And I say
No.
yet because that I'm on a mission to stop that dieting cycle.
Mm, mm,
The program that I coach is called Fast Way to Fat Loss. The fast part is intermittent fasting. Here's the caveat though. Intermittent fasting is a tool, it's not a diet. And that's the problem that a lot of people think is that, oh, I only eat for 8 hours. I can have whatever I want. That's
mm,
not the case. And actually, intermittent fasting is also 12 hours. So if you stop eating at 7 p.m. and then your first meal again is at 7 a.m., that is intermittent fasting. The
mm,
problem that we have is that most of us get up at like 5 a.m. We have a lot of creamer with our coffee. We might grab a donut, a bagel, or something right there. So there, right there is your high carbs. You just spiked your blood sugar. You're out the door. You might go through the drive-through. Okay, so there's a lot of processed food, spiking your blood sugar again. You get to work, or maybe you're working from home and you're grabbing handfuls of candy or other things. Guess what? Spiking your blood sugar. Then it's noon. Okay, I really didn't eat what I should have, so now I'm not going to eat anything. I'm just going to, I'm not going to eat anything. Well, then it's 2 or 3 o'clock and you're starving. And what are you grabbing? Sugar. And
mm,
then you go for dinner. And then after dinner, you're like, oh, I want sugar. I need something sweet. That's 9, 10 o'clock. And now you've only had digestive rest from 10 p.m., maybe 11 p.m. until 5 o'clock the next day. So that's only 6 hours. So
mm,
if you can see intermittent fasting as a tool and that you're going to eat whole foods, less processed, and you give yourself that 12-hour window, maybe 14 or 16, and you use it as a tool to help decrease insulin resistance, to help increase insulin sensitivity. It helps with what's called autophagy, which is cell turnover. It does help with sleep. It does help with inflammation. There's all these things it helps with, but it has to be used as a tool in conjunction with your nutrition.
mm. It's a bit like um, running a marathon and then saying, "Oh, I'm going. I've run that and I've used up all those calories and everything, and now I'm going to have a big,
Yeah.
you know,
We
um,
I
unhealthy
can't believe
meal."
to, yeah. We so want something shiny or saying, okay, this is it. So
Mm,
if we do this, this will get us healthy. Oh no, if we
mm,
do this, this will get us healthy. It's it's using a lot of different tools along with nutrition and fitness that will get us healthy.
mm, mm. And a lot of people will say they're time poor. Oh, I haven't got time, so it's easy just to
Mm,
open a packet of food and
hmm.
eat it. But really, I know myself, I can produce a really healthy dinner, for example, in under 30 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And I think the important thing is to have the ingredients on hand,
Hmm.
but also you could pre-prepare, um,
Hmm.
or you hear of people on a Sunday planning, especially if they go to work, planning their meals for the week, actually doing a big cook up and having it all done,
Hmm.
or boiling some eggs and you've got
Hmm.
that for a snack. So planning would come into it as well. I think people just feel that it's all a bit too hard and too complicated, but it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. Planning is huge. Maybe you see one recipe like for your listeners that make it this far, I would love to give them a free guide that has lots of recipes. And there's gonna be lots of recipes for each day, but take one of those recipes and double, triple, quadruple it. So that
Mm,
way you have it for 3 or 4 days, or maybe you freeze it. So that way you can use it later on. It doesn't have to be hard. The thing is, we tell ourselves it's hard. We tell ourselves that
mm,
this is just, oh, I just can't do it. But honestly, how long does it take to go get takeout? It takes probably 30, 40 minutes. You could have had, made that meal and so much better for you. And actually, the volume of food that you can have with real food is amazing. And most of
mm.
my clients, their first complaint to me is that they're eating too much. They can't believe how much they have to eat.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
when you start eating less processed food, the amount of food that you have to eat to get your nutrition, it's pretty crazy.
Mm, mm. Well, look, I could talk to you about this all day, and so many questions, and I would love to have you come back onto the show. You've got a lot of topics, you've got a lot of information to share, which would be really relevant to the listeners. So I hope that you will come back
Oh,
and chat to
absolutely.
me again. But before we go, is there anything? I've got one question I always ask my guests, but before I get to that, is there anything, any last advice that you'd like to give, or any point we haven't covered?
I would say, I kind of just said that, there's never an age where you can say, I'm too old. You're not. You have the power. I always say you are the secret sauce. People's like, what's the secret sauce? You are the secret sauce. And you're never too old. It's never too late to start taking care of your health. It's always a possibility. Now, can we get you off of medication? Maybe, but we can also try to get you on the lowest effective dose and try
Mm,
to make it where we're not getting on more medication.
mm.
So, feel free to reach out to me on amykwilson.com. I love chatting, or Instagram at the nutrition coach pharmacist. And yeah, let's get you healthy. You can
Yeah.
get
Well,
healthy.
I will be putting all your
Yeah.
contact details and links in the show notes and the blog posts that I always prepare. And that's the great thing about the internet. We can, you can have clients all over the world. So where you are, location isn't a barrier to becoming healthy. So my last question to you, Amy, is, as I said, something I always ask my guests, and that is, what does being a woman living well mean to you?
It means that I have energy. It means I have strength. It means I have clarity. And it means balance, that I'm no longer chasing skinny, that I'm no longer worrying about the next fad diet or the next latest, greatest thing, that I am older, wiser, and no longer play those stupid games that we played in our 20s, that we can be amazing and strong and healthy and vibrant without all that, without all that baggage back in the
Mm,
past.
mm, mm. Yes, people often say, oh, I wish I was back then or something, and I don't. I'm quite happy with life now and the person that I am. Totally,
Mhm.
an improved version, I have to say, of what I was when I was younger. So I probably wouldn't really want to go back. But I love that answer, and I also love the fact that I've done well, this is the seventh season of the podcast, and I've never had the same answer twice. So
Oh,
it's
that's
just
awesome.
wonderful that everyone has their own thoughts on living well, and
Mhm.
because it does encompass every area of our life. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining me today. It was wonderful to have you on the show, and I really learnt a lot. There were a couple of things I didn't get to cover, but actually, I will ask you one quick one. With carbohydrates, we'll keep it short,
Mhm.
but people will go, oh no, I can't eat carbs, but that's not true, is it?
We forget carbohydrates are fruit and vegetables. What they're
Mm,
thinking is pasta, simple carbohydrates, things that go
yeah.
right into sugar. So I always say if you can throw water on it and it dissolves, that's a simple carbohydrate.
Mm,
So bread, certain pastas, things like that. So you still can eat carbohydrates. You can have grains, you can have fruits, you can have vegetables. It's just what you do with them and how you eat them, and always
mm.
pair them with a protein and a
And a
fat,
fat.
and that's going to help.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Well, listeners, if you've got any other questions or that, hop on to Amy because she's very knowledgeable and she will be able to help you, I'm sure, to get started. And, you know, we do have to remember to respect our bodies and to look after them because it's the only one we've got. So we do want to try and live well for as long as we can and to be part of life rather than sitting on the sidelines. So thank you again, Amy, for you joining me today and sharing all this great information. I've been taking notes and, you know, I'm going to get my husband to listen to this podcast episode. So thanks again for joining me.
Thank you, Sue.
Well, what a wonderful conversation I had with Amy K. Wilson about the relationship between blood sugar spikes and aging and how we can balance our sugar levels as a key to our overall health. She's such a knowledgeable lady, and I'm going to be asking her to come back because I know there's a lot of other topics that we could have talked about today. I hope that you've learned a little bit more about the relationship with food, eating whole foods, making sure that we have a protein, carbohydrate and fat with our each meal. And remember, if you want to start making changes and you can't do it on your own, reach out. So that's all we have time for today. But remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.